I'm halfway through the Stella Prize shortlist. It's time for an update. Hi, I'm Olivia. This is AV Club, where I'm usually talking lit fic, horror books, weird books, whatever I want to talk about. But I am also an American living in Australia, and so I have a high interest in reading Australian books. The Stella Prize is a literary prize here in Australia for women and non binary authors. I started reading the long list, which, luckily for me, the books that came in first from the library were also making it to the short list. So I've now read half of the short list. I want to talk about three of those books with you today before I return them to the library where they have reserves on them and picking up a new one. And I'll let you know what my current choice for the winner is. The first one that I read was Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks. This is a memoir talking about the time in her life where her husband suddenly passed. And we're looking at this years into the future where she has returned to Australia in order to finally be able to grieve her husband. Her husband was American and wanted to live in the US. She always missed Australia. It was a point of contention for them, but they did live in the US and raise their children there. And her husband suddenly passed on Memorial Day. So, foremost, this is a memoir about her own grief and about her recollections of that time, but also why she's able to grieve it now. It talks so much about how the grieving process was really interrupted whenever she was living in the US and her husband had suddenly passed very far from her, that she was in Martha's Vineyard and he passed in Washington, D.C. And she was not able to see his body for a long time. Even to identify him, she identified his body from a photograph. And so there was so much delay in even being able to have awareness of like what had actually happened. That period was marked by levels of disbelief and struggles with the American healthcare system and the procedure that they went about things in order to autopsy and release the body, etc., on top of the fact that both of her sons were not with her either, or with the dad. One of them is in boarding school in the US at the time and had to be told by a teacher, because both Geraldine Brooks and the father were of some acclaim, that her husband was a journalist, a wartime journalist. And so this was a death that would be reported in the news, or that they could get news alerts. And so she couldn't tell them in person. Her other son was like mid flight to Australia, which is like a day long flight, and was texted by someone and saw a text, you know, condolences about the loss of his father before the mom had even gotten a chance to talk to him, because it was just there on his phone whenever he got off the phone into Australia. And so talking about just like how hard there the logistics of the situation was, on top of the fact that it was like losing her partner. And so it was like a very moving memoir of grief. However, as far as like the prize goes, would not necessarily be my winner. The thing that I would have wanted to see more from in this, for it to be like a really great literary memoir. Like, this is her life and she can talk about it however she wants to. But in order for it to be like a memoir that I thought was made it the best book of the year, published by an Australian woman or non-binary author, it would really need to have like something else that transformed it. So talking more about that American structural uh, block in order to to grieve and just treat other people with humanity. It touches on the way that grieving is approached in different cultures. um I don't remember all of the ones, but it was like so brief of a time, but it was talking about like sitting Shiva in Jewish tradition and stuff like that. And I thought that like if that was maybe a bit more explored, like that would have been something that really put it over the top for me. But yeah, I'm really glad that I read this, but I was also reading, this was the first book that I read after we lost Roland. And so I was like very deep in my own grief at the time too. Obviously, losing a cat, a companion animal, is different than losing your husband. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on here that is like how she had to immediately take responsibility over arrangements and things and communicating things and being the liaison while she has just lost her husband, and like thinking about how busy your life becomes to, get an obituary written, all of these things that you don't think about, and in the most like stressful moment of your life. Like, it makes sense that you would have to compartmentalize that and not be able to really grieve until later. That's very different than, grieving an animal that, you've lived with for a decade. I love Roland very much, but I didn't have, I mean, even that day, like making arrangements for Roland because it was so sudden that we were just woken up with the news that he had passed at the vet, that we had to figure out, like, okay, well, what are we doing with his body? Like, where are we going to bury him? What blanket are we going to bury him in? There was still things to decide, but not in the same way. And so, yeah, I can definitely see how it would be a stressful time, but moving as like a personal grief memoir, but not my winner. I would say. I think I gave this maybe 3 stars just because I don't think that it explored any of the things that would sit with me for a long time to like really be like thinking over, mulling over, contemplating things in a new way. But I was moved by her story. I haven't read her fiction. And she's talking about how she's like writing Horse, which is like her, I guess, best-selling novel that I'm just not aware of. And she's talking about how she was like in the middle of writing it during this, and that she just like had to get back to work, and that doing the work and was part of helping her process and progress and just do the day-to-day things that she still needed to do despite wanting to stop. So yeah, if you like reading a memoir, I think this is a good one. Next, I read The Rot by Evelyn Araluen, and this I read in one sitting. This is a poetry collection, and it takes many different forms. Like, some of it is more prose, some of it are more traditional poems, some is almost like short essay. Like, there's a lot of different ways that it's approached in here, but it is a lot about being a girl and girlhood living at the kind of the end of the world, like late stage capitalism, and living with the horrors that we see on television. A lot of it is about Palestine, a lot of it is about colonialism in Australia. Evelyn Araluen is a First Nations Australian. Let me see. She is a Gory and Quarry poet and born and raised on Darug country. So she is speaking from personal experience here, as well as a broader historical sense. But there was so much rage in this poetry collection, and rightfully so. And there was something cathartic about it, because I have to be very careful in how I talk about things, because there are like not free speech laws in Australia. And I am on a visa, and yeah, I just have to be careful in how I talk about things. But whenever you see the lack of humanity in things that are happening in, it's hard to even say war, and I have to be very careful with my language now. So, I think that you follow, but just like the absolute lack of humanity and the level of violence that we are exposed to daily, and the lack of care for human life, for children, for women, for men, for animals, all of those things, and that we are meant to just like show up to jobs every day, is there's like no level of rage I think that could be even approaching appropriate. But the way that the language is used in here is like the closest thing, and it is like, we should be mad, we should be so mad, we should be mad all of the time. And this, I think, was like a perfect collection to encapsulate that. And just the language was so beautiful. The way that sentences were put together were so novel to me. And it was, I felt like it was so perfect for a single sitting read that I just kind of like got taken over by it and like got sucked into it, and had this such a strong experience, like physical experience reading it. I know Evelyn Araluen won the Stella Prize a few years ago for her collection Drop Bear, which I have not yet read, but definitely plan to now. I don't know exactly what of, I assume it has to do with Australiana in some way for it to be called Drop Bear, and being kind of cheeky. But yeah, this has the feeling of having so much anger in you, righteous anger, that it like cannot even be contained inside your body, and it just makes you feel insane, because that is how everyone should be feeling and approaching it. So excellent collection. I gave this 5 stars. And then most recently, I read both Thunderhead and Fireweather by Miranda Darling. Fireweather is the one that is actually on the Stella Prize shortlist. However, these are 2 companion novels. They feature the same main character. They aren't, I mean, it does feel like it's a sequel, but you don't have to have read Thunderhead to read Fireweather. But if you're interested in Fireweather, I don't see why you wouldn't just read both of them, because altogether it's, 250 pages maybe. So yeah, that is, and they're written in a very similar style too. And so yeah, if you read Thunderhead and you don't get on with the writing style at all, I don't know that you will get on with Fireweather then. So like I think they are very related. However, I will say that I preferred Fireweather. So Thunderhead focuses on Winona Dalloway. It's a reference to Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. There's other references to Virginia Woolf through the stories, and has that tone to it, that it is about um femininity in some way, that it's about feminism, the rights of women in some way. And she has 2 small children, and at best kind of absent husband, but he is violent. He is definitely gaslighting her into thinking that she is mentally ill, and that she is like forgetting things, or is just like otherwise not getting things quite right. There is like a dinner party at the end, which is kind of like how Mrs. Dalloway goes. It's like it's a day in the life, and it finishes off at this dinner party, and that's how this book goes as well. But it is such a creative writing style that it is like kind of stream of consciousness, but a very experimental writing style. And just like things are formatted in interesting ways. The way that things are written are very poetic, but there's a lot of liberties taken, and it is like not so much about the plot, more so than like understanding Winona's voice. And this one I rated, I think, 3 stars. However, Fireweather I would give like 3.5, 4 stars. I don't know if it's because I finally like hit my stride with her voice, but I was in the first one, I was like, narrating this narrating voice is not the same person that this book is about. Like, I just do not believe it. I Because it's so arcane, and how the references she's making are, and just like how over the top poetic, etc. But I do think that's the point, and I think I like knew that's the point. Just knowing that was the point wasn't enough for me in the first one. However, it worked for me more in this one. In this one, she has divorced her husband, and she's like, still has the 2 young children, except for now they are having to be transported between her and her husband. They don't like being with their father. And so that's a point of contention with her and her ex-husband, and also a source of stress for her and the children. And this follows her in a day where she is without the children, that they're with their father, and having that anxiety and thinking about who she is as an ex-wife, thinking about who she is as a mother whenever her children aren't there, and thinking about like dualities in that way. And so also you have the duality of like this woman has like what seems like a very kind of mundane life, and what we would consider like mundane issues like divorce feels so mundane at this point. However, it's obviously a source of great stress for her, and the circumstances of this specific marriage are more than mundane, and it has transformed her mind in such a way. And she's also trying to reclaim the parts of her brain that were before there, and thinking about, before I was married, before I had all of these issues, who was I? What was I enjoying? How did I relate with other women? How did I relate to myself? Definitely about the writing style. I feel like I'm telling you about the plot, but the plot is like really secondary to these almost like vignette mini essay things where she'll kind of pick on a topic for a while and kind of go stream of consciousness on it in a very poetic way. There is a talking dog in this. The thing is, like in this one, she's also having seizures, and her husband is like gaslighting her and these people into thinking that she's like crazy. And she's like, I don't think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe he's right. Like, because I don't really know what was going on either. And so there's that going on, like this medical diagnosis part of it. But yes, most of what she's doing in talking to animals feels more metaphorical and more of a point of being understimulated in areas. So, and I described this in my reading vlog where I read this, but it's written almost with like a religious fervor, that it is like the type of language that you would read in like very just like a biblically accurate angel kind of writing, like it is not religious, but it's like that fervor, like that insanity that like the divine would drive you to. That's what I get out of this. And yeah, I I will just reread this section that I had talked about in my reading vlog, so you get like kind of a sense of the writing style. This is Bruce the dog talking to her and saying, "You might think of them as always with you," talking about the children. The transcendence of consciousness within space-time begins with the experience of dual unity. You are Winona, and you are also your children. You have your heart, and you hold their hearts. She says, I do have a transcendence project, yes, and it has this very idea at its core. It began as a way to find the deeper meaning of my physical situation, to unite the mundanity of domestic life with the elevated and heavenly experience of the cosmos. It is a project that would harness the tension inherent between the two, that would see the dairy aisle of the supermarket vibrate alongside the contemplation of infinite galaxies and create a third state of being, of harmonic dualism. Very interesting. And so sometimes it will actually be about like the mundanity of having children, but it flitters between like the two ideas of being the experience of all of the cosmos with, you know, walking along and seeing a bird. So yeah, those are the three Stella Prize shortlist books that I've read so far. In order, 3 star for me, then like a 3.5, 4 star. And so currently my choice is the Rot 5 star. That has been my favorite and one of my all-time favorite poetry collections. Really can't say enough good about this collection, and just what it speaks to be in, I mean, I guess it was in 2025, but I think it speaks so much to about this moment in time that it feels right to me for it to be a winner. I don't know. I don't know if they'll pick a repeat winner again so soon, but loved this and definitely want to get to Drop Bear. So let me know. Are you reading the Stella Prize? Are you reading any other Australian lit? Have you read any of the other choices on the shortlist? I'll put the full shortlist right here. The the book I am picking up from the library today is not on the short list. It was on the long list. So yeah, the rest of these It says they've been on order at the library for weeks. Like whenever the long list got announced, I put them on reserve and it said they were on order, which I thought would mean like how long does it take to a book to come in? Like they could go down the street and get it at the bookstore. So I don't know how long the library process of on order is, if it's like waiting on budgets or something like that. But I really thought that they would come in by then because on order sounds like it's coming in, and you'll have it soon, Olivia, but not the case. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll get to all of the shortlist, but it will not be for lack of trying or lack of desire to, before the winner is announced. So yeah, are you reading any other literary lists? Anything else that I should check out? Reading a short list or a long list takes up so much of your reading bandwidth for so long that I don't know that I want to delve into like reading all of like the Women's Prize or Booker Prize, or anything like that, but I am interested. I do look into those things. So yeah, let me know what you're reading, but I will talk to you again soon. Bye.